Hello everyone, welcome to today's class. In today's class, we'll be having an overview of the 12 principles of animation. Many people, when they teach these principles, they teach it from the angle of okay, what you need to do to make your animation look better, and much more making it look better, making it have appeal. But I don't think that is the result. Well, I don't think that is what these 12 principles of animation are. First off, these 12 principles of animation, for me, okay, the way I approach is that I broadly categorize them into two groups. One is the category that has to do with, you know, the good workflow one should adopt while animating. One has to do with the workflow that we should adopt while animating. Then the second is it's a thought behind movement, how objects interact. That's the theory behind how objects interact with one another, how movement occur, how objects interact with one another, and they interact with their environment. There are some law of physics because we are trying to replicate life, right? So there are some laws of physics. There are some principles behind all of this that we need to take cognizance of. For instance, the squash and stretch, right? There are ways that objects squash. There are ways that object stretches. So while animating, we now need to have all of this. We need to be very observant. Now, one of the very soft skill as an animator we need to have is observation. Observation is key. All of these principles is actually they were actually lifted from a book called The Illusion of Life, written by Disney animators Ole Johnston and Frank Thomas, which was written to provide guideline to Disney animation style. However, these principles in the book now have not is now accepted worldwide and now used worldwide. For instance, Richard William, the author of a very good book for every animators need to read. Apart from this illusion of life, every animators need to read this book. There's a video, in fact, you need to watch the video also called Animator Survivor Kit. Now, Richard William borrowed plenty of his principle from this illusion of life. Now, the first principle we'll be taking a look at is called squash and stretch. This is how objects behave and interact with its environment based on its mass and weight. That is, a heavy object will bounce less and a lighter object will bounce more. For example, a basketball bounces more than a rolling ball. For instance, you can see with this demonstration here, there is the way this golf ball is interacting. Interesting enough, right? When you hold a golf ball, you would not have believed that it will really squash and stretch the way it's doing here. In this four ball is the one at the left, the extreme left there. You wouldn't have believed that it would behave as is squashing them. Then the other one is the one at the top is yeah, the one at the top is the one at the top is tennis ball. You can see also how it's behaving too. Then other ones, then the one at the right, extreme right, is like a balloon ball. You can see how it's also behaving. Fundamentally, the heavier the object, the less the bounce, the less the squash, and the softer, the more the squash. So you can see it's being demonstrated here. This is a heavy bowling ball. You can see it has less bounce as different from this soft ball that bounces more, as different from the ping pong ball also. You can see that bounce more. Then you can see this bubble, how it's behaving, like being swept by air here and there until it bursts. Then squash and stretch also is not just about all these balls alone. It's also, as I said, it's about how objects behave on this planet Earth, right? Especially the live objects. For instance, as you can see here, this is someone's face. You know, when we are excited, when we are angry, there is plenty of squash and stretch happening in our face. You can see here also, there's squash and stretch happening with this person when he's getting up, when he's trying to get up, right? Here now, there's some level of squash happening. With all the examples I've shown you so far, the bounce ball, the ping ball, how to achieve all of that in especially if you're focusing on motion graphics, that is just using basic shape to tell a story. So you can see how that plays out here with this ball. But mind you, this principle, right? Once you understand it, these are just fundamentals, these are just basics, right? For instance, I just showed you how this face, right? So you can see once you understand, you can apply it to things like maybe let's say you are animating a face, right? You can see, especially when it's not like it's a hard um, object. This is like a natural body, right? It's not like it's maybe a tank or something. This is a natural body, so it will observe that um, this principle of squash and stretch. In this whole idea of representing squash, that an object is interacting with its environment, and is also showing us how much of in time, right? How much of velocity, how much of speed it is at a point in time. Now, animators over time has also devised a, a technique called smear and blur that animators use to give that sense of, oh, this object is in speed, is in motion, right? So there's that squash, there's that this thing happening, but this is a unique way of doing that called smear. So here you can see the Simpson, you can see this other cartoon here having this smear. So it's called smear. The idea is that it gives the sense of, okay, this particular thing is in motion, is in speed. A good thing to note is that while observing the principle of squash and stretch, you don't just squash or you don't just stretch things anyhow. There is a principle that it must maintain its volume over time. For instance, now let's take this let's take this square, right? Once it squashes, right, it will maintain its volume over time. That's you find here. Okay, this is a stretching here. That's if it stretches, right, then it needs to reduce the x axis, that's its x length, right? Which is called yes, that's the length, yes. The length expand, right? Then the height should decrease, right? Do you understand? The That's the x value now increase, then the y value should decrease in proportion. The y value should decrease in proportion to the x value increasing. All of this is to because, for instance, this face now that we showed, though it also now depends the style of animation, but if you are keeping it real, right? Since we've been able to have a way to squash this face, it should in a way look bigger as opposed to when it's being stretched. So that's just the basic rule to observe why so that you wouldn't, well, it all some style also permits one to, you know what, to break that law of physics, to break the, when the style permits you to like go overboard, right? However, in on planet Earth, the way it works is that if something is stretched, let's say you are stretching it, right? That's the x value is increasing, then the y value should decrease in proportion to that, in proportion to the x. Then the next principle is ease in and ease out. When an object moves away from the position of rest, now the basic law of physics, right, states that every object by default are in rest except compared, right? So normally, when an object moves away from that rest and goes into motion, it doesn't go with just full force. Rather, it accelerates. It moves gradually from the rest, then goes to full acceleration, then later it eases into rest. That's it eases out, then eases into rest. Now get the time I just used, because this used to confuse me a lot. It used to confuse me a lot because before I felt that okay, ease out, right, should mean the last thing that is happening, right? Rather, when you say ease out, you know that what you're saying is easing out of rest. That's it's starting to do something. It's easing out of rest. Then when it is eases in, then it is easing into rest. That is, it has started a particular motion, right? Then it's now easing into rest. Now that's very crucial for you to understand, because when we start going into when we start going into animation, all of this information comes to bear. Now, a very good way to demonstrate this is they have like a car or a motor, right? A car doesn't just, once it starts, it doesn't just go to full speed. Rather, it takes its time to build acceleration. Then later on, right, it now eases into rest. However, mind you, I said that this, in general, this is generally, this is it, but there are some other objects that doesn't follow this pattern that I just described. For instance, if we were to have a bullet, we wouldn't have it easing out of rest. We wouldn't have it easing out. Rather, it comes out with full acceleration first off, right? Then later it will now ease into rest. So, a golden rule to observe here, or how it works, is that with this diagram you're looking at now, is that let's say or everything happened under 1 second, right? Rem- Now, by default, traditionally, the way motion picture is arranged is that we have 24 frames per second. That's 24 images for every second. So right now, this is a typical case, but this one is 25, right? This is 25 we are looking at now. 25 frames we are looking at. Now, the way arrange we arrange the frames now, the top one there is arranged evenly. That's at every frame. It's arranged evenly. But the one in the bottom, it has more frames, right? At the beginning, not too far from each other, not too far from each other, not too far from each other. Then when you go to the middle, they were farther, very much farther. Then when we got to the ending, They are now very, very, very close. Now, this form of arrangement, what it eventually does is it gives the idea that this object, while moving in time, is out of rest, then eased into rests back. So that's basically that's the idea behind motion picture, right? That's the idea behind video and motion picture is that you arrange objects. They actually stay, right? Because they are played in time. Then that gives the idea that okay, oh, this thing is moving, whereas they are not actually moving, but our brain now pieces everything together. So how you now arrange them, if you have them closer to each other, right, they will look very smooth. They look very smooth as compared to when they are wider apart. So when they are arranged closer, they it gives that sense of ease. There's the ease movement happening. Now this is how this this whole idea of making it close, making the frame close to each other, and making it far apart from each other is also there's a way it's represented in animation softwares, because before now how the guns the old guys in animation, the way they achieve this is by drawing. Then they draw. But the software we are using now, they've made life easier. That though there are now parameters we need to adjust to still give us that effect to for us to have control of that. So that parameter is called animation curve. Now, whatever software, Maya or 3D, Cinema 4D, whatever good software you're using, it allows you, it gives you this control, the animation curve. So right here, what we are looking at is that we find there's one called linear. You find so how this line now is arranged, the behavior of this line, the way it's arranged now, we now determine if you are making the the at each point in time, if you are making it the frame very close to each other, that is the frame, in other words the object itself also, if you're making them very close to each other or you are making it far apart, right? That's if you are very making it close, you are easing them. So for instance, the first one is called linear. Everything is just everything was just organized, was just arranged evenly. So it just goes evenly all through, like linear, it's just linear. As opposed to the one called power ease. So there are plenty. So here there are plenty frames arranged very close to each other here at the beginning, arranged very close to each other at the beginning. However, when we now go closer in the middle to the middle, it's there is like a huge gap happening. So we find the objects somewhat snapping away from the middle. When once it gets to the middle, it snaps into the other side of of the it's just snap just away from the middle, then goes to the ending here and lingers very much more. That is the in the ending, the frame, the object, the frame right now, the object are arranged very, 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 very closer to each other. Now we have this is out, is in. So you find it here that okay, you find here that okay, at the beginning, you can see the curve too. So it's you find in the ease out, ease in, you can see the curve just rises. There's no easily in it rising to the top. It's there's this ease in rising to the top and also coming down, right? So what that gives is that okay, once it's going from this particular once it's going from this particular place to this other place, it does that with ease. The third principle is the principle of arc. Most human and animal movements follow an invisible arc or closely circular path. So also does thrown objects and projected objects. There is a particular arc when you do a breakdown of how movement occurs. There's like an arc or circular path that they follow. Only robots, right? Only like yes, only robots what is actually mechanically designed to have the ability to move at constant speed, at constant manner. So you find this principle at work in when we are working. At work when we are working, in our every of our movements. So they come to bear in our cycle. Also, the run or walk cycle of animals. The you find this okay. This is the human feet, right? The way we move. And the good thing with animation is that it helps you to observe, be much more observant about movement. Before now, right, you wouldn't have been taking this data when you see people walk. It was when I was paying more attention on work cycle, I realized that people's when they are walking, their head tends to go down, up, down. Before then, that whole idea would just be you would be seeing the data, but you won't be able to recognize. You won't be able to like assimilate. But with that's what one thing animation does. It makes you to pay attention the more. This is Mushu in the Mulan cartoon. So you can see when he hits the distance, when he hits this thing on his head, there is this circular part. So does all the cartoon. Also, it's also crucial to know whenever we are doing our head turn because this is very tricky here. You may think like when I turn my head, you may think I just turn right, but the when you actually look closely, you realize the head while on that process of turning came down a bit. Like the one you have here, it came down a bit in the middle one, the middle post or the middle frame. The head came down slightly a bit, right? And also closed. Yes, where we've studied it, animators have studied and realized that whenever a human or also animal they are turning their head, they usually bat, they usually close their eyes. So this is also how it plays out in in motion graphics. Whenever we are using shapes, basic shape, you find that in the bouncing ball to in order to give it that realistic feel, as different from if it's without an arc, it starts looking mechanized. You understand? Well, sometimes this may be what we want. This may be what we want. That's the one without an arc, but that will be we going out of reality, not so much paying attention to the physics, the natural physics that occur here. Except maybe something is also compelling it to move without an arc.